Aunt Mary,
Hi.
I'm a bit late calling. I'm sorry about that. So, do you have time? Aunt Mary? Hello? What the hell's going on here?
Hello.
Hey, Aunt Mary, you there?
Yeah.
All right, good. It didn't seem to work last time.
Yes. I don't know what happened.
That's all right. I seem to have a lot of those kind of issues with my phone. A lot of people do. I've been getting a lot of people since Natalie disappeared have told me that they can't get a hold of me or they can't open any files from me or their phone does weird stuff if they try to watch my videos. A lot of people who offered to help, like immediately after offering to help, we were unfriended, and it was on their end, so they had to refriend me in order for us to speak. It's been a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a lady in town named Laura Nelson. She says that she thinks the government's doing it, which I guess they have the technology to do that. At least she's not one of those wingnuts telling me it's the Illuminati that's after me or some alien conspiracy or some other tinfoil hat bullshit.
Oh, okay.
There are a lot of those kind of people, though. They think it's the Illuminati or Freemasons or some crap like that.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of people that like to harass me and threaten me. Right now, there's one named Shiloh Amiot. Very
Oh.
much not fun. But there's actually a lot of them. I get a lot of harassment ever since the news. So I figure I gotta have at least one person listen to my story, and since you're a relative, I figure I'll share it with you.
So does Shiloh live in Chapel or?
No, this is some internet wingnut.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of them. See, my friends, or people who called themselves my friends, didn't have time to bother with finding out what's going on. But these internet wingnuts, they got nothing better to do with their time than stick their nose in business that ain't theirs and try to destroy people's lives. So, since I'm being attacked in public, I make it very public that I'm being attacked in public, and I make it very public that I speak out in public.
Yeah.
I'd
And
much
what did you say Shiloh's last name was?
Amiot, Amitte.
Okay.
Matter of fact, that person has posted more than one threat, but they post the threat and then they delete the message.
Oh, okay.
So I suppose I had to get started on my story, huh? Get through it as fast as possible.
Well, you can, yeah, start on it.
All right. Well, I guess we'll make this part one then. Um. Well, you know how I was when I was a kid. I grew up in the system. Um. I was beaten up in the system for the color of my skin, and I was molested and raped, and that's not stuff that happens to boys. According to the rest of the world, this is only stuff that happens to girls, and it's pretty screwed up. And in those classes, we got to learn about who it is that's most likely to do those things and all that. I got to be locked up with in some of the places I was at were co-ed, so you get to hear from the girls that cut on themselves about why they cut on themselves. Most of the time, it's because their daddy raped them or molested them, and they tried telling their mom, and their mom didn't listen or called them a liar or whatever else, and then they have to. I'm trying to remember the term that's used. Normalize with their predators. Play like everything's good to go. And
Yeah.
so they end up cutting on themselves, and instead of listening to them, because they're cutting on themselves because nobody listens, and they're screaming out to be heard. And instead of listening to what they have to say, they get locked up on suicide watch. They get a choice between being locked up or going to live with their predator. And it's a pretty screwed up system. And it happens to boys too. But we teach boys and girls differently. We teach girls to be more manipulative, and we teach boys to be more strength and power, you know? So we end up with a lot of issues from that. Starting at age 15, boys start killing themselves at 5 times the rate of girls. Also, starting at age 15, girls start cutting on themselves at 5 times the rate of boys. 1 in 4 girls will be molested by the time they turn 18, most of those from one parent or the other. And boys, that ratio is 1 in 6. But boys are less likely to come forward because if a girl comes forward, she's more likely to be heard. A boy, if he comes forward, he's more likely to be ostracized. It's kind of like when a girl beats on you for 30 minutes and you get hit for 30 minutes and you just take it and people go, ha ha, you got beat up by a girl. But if you push her to get her away from you, then all of a sudden you're a woman beater. And that's how our society works. But when I was homeless, I I rescued a lot of people. My friends here in Nebraska, they pretty much all turned into meth heads. And in order to hang out with them, I had to do meth, and I didn't like meth, so I just left. And that was 2003. And that's when I went to Boulder, and I had enough of the people that I cared about freeze to death that I couldn't handle it anymore, and I left. There was a friend of mine named Cody who gave me a ride back to Nebraska here, and I became friends with Lana Engeline, who is my little brother. You know Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lana Engeline was his pot dealer. So I started getting pot from her, and we became friends. And she had a lady named Jerry Sparks. Well, it was Jerry Payne at the time. She was uh, married to a guy named Tom Payne. And the story that she told is that Tom was scaring the hell out of her and threatening to abuse her because she wouldn't give him a blowjob. And I don't know the truth or whatnot about it, but I do know that I did my best to help Miss Jerry at that point, and we did pretty good. You know, I mean, I ended up doing a lot of free work for Lana. She was supposed to pay me and just ended up never paying me. There was one time that I was really short and needed to be able to pay my bills, and she was going to pay me like $200 to help move all of their stuff and all of their books out to Laura Nelson's house. And what ended up happening is I ended up getting a guitar for that. They gave me a crappy old acoustic, but I was glad to have it, you know. But anyway, I guess we'll get to the main story and we'll get back to that later. Um, so
Yeah.
when I went back to Boulder, I didn't want to see my friends die all the time. I didn't want to hear about them dying all the time. And the police, the American public, they hate the homeless more than anyone. All of the stuff that you get to hear, and I'm sure being from Nebraska, you got to hear all that stuff about how all black people are lazy and all black people are on crack and all that other bullshit. Well, they say the same thing about homeless. And pretty much all of these social groups that back in the 60s and 70s, it was socially acceptable to blame them for everything and to go after them and abuse them. They started introducing laws that make it, you know, more illegal to do that, but they didn't do the same with the homeless. So people are less likely to go after blacks or Mexicans or immigrants because there's more consequences and there's more likely to be consequences because socially it's not okay to be racist anymore. So all those racists that want to be able to take that stuff out on somebody, they take it out on the homeless. And all that stuff that you get to hear growing up about how all Indians are drunks and all that other racist bull crap, they say all that stuff about the homeless. And I started passing out blankets so that people wouldn't freeze to death and walking people to the warming centers and the homeless shelters in Boulder. And I did that for about 7 years. There was a guy named Josh Hughes, and he was about my best friend at the time. And there was a guy named Brandon Ratner and his girlfriend Veronica Randall. And I was having a pretty tough time, but I had my own shop and I had really bad teeth. And for about 5 years, excruciating pain every day. People complain about their tooth pain from one tooth and they get it yanked out a week later. And I didn't have insurance and I didn't have any money. So I spent over that 5 years, I spent about 5 grand trying to get those teeth yanked. I'd go in, they'd tell me, all right, well, give me your money and we'll do some x-rays. Here's some antibiotics and come back in 2 weeks and bring some money or we can't yank them out. It's cash and carry at the time. So I never had the money to get my teeth yanked because I was always paying for the x-rays and all that other stuff. Spent about $5,000 on that and never had any of my teeth yanked. So it got really bad. And Miss Jerry, she was there was I helped Miss Jerry move like 7 times because she kept moving in with abusive dudes. And I don't know if that's true or not because I wasn't there to see the abuse. And also, she'd move out of one abusive guy's house into another guy's house, and then that dude was abusive, so she'd change her story about the first guy and move back in with him. And meanwhile, she's dragging her kids the whole way. Well, she went down. She was living in Montana at the time, and she said that there was a place up there in Montana where I could get my teeth yanked out for like $35. It was a low income place. So the guy that she had moved out of his house at least twice. His name was Ron Reeder, and this is one of those people that she was talking about how terrible a person he was, and then later on his story changed, or her story changed, and so she was going down to Alliance to go see him. She was trying to hide the fact that she was seeing him from Lana Engeline because she's kind of, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I thought, okay, go on.
So anyway, she was trying to hide the fact that she was seeing Ron Reeder from Lana Engeline, and because of that, she was going to see him in Alliance, and so she had Ron Reeder pick me up, and he drove me to Alliance, Nebraska, where Jerry took me the rest of the way to Montana, and I was able to get my teeth yanked out.
Oh, okay.
I got 22 of them yanked out at once, and I have 0 teeth now. But that was in 2014 or 2015, I think.
But then you had dentures for a while.
No, I didn't. I've never had dentures.
Oh,
I never had the money for that. I was supposed to go in and see about getting dentures fitted after Natalie was killed, but that just never happened because Natalie was killed. Anyway, so I was really hoping that since I had all my teeth yanked out and I wouldn't have to deal with that pain anymore, my life would get better. Of course, when you're not good looking and you don't have any teeth, people really treat you like shit. You notice immediately that you're less of a human being than most of society. So I was having a pretty rough time, and I still had that shop out on 75th and Arapahoe. It was just a little corner of a barn. And Josh Hughes, he used to help me to take old busted computers out of the garbage can and refurbish them for homeless people. Um, he got into a him and his girlfriend weren't very nice to each other, so they broke up, and he couldn't keep his place. And he said that he was all alone, and his parents wouldn't do anything to help, and so on and so forth. So I let him move out there with all of his stuff, and he wasn't supposed to stay there. He was supposed to basically it was just storage for his stuff and for mine at that point because there was no room for me to do the work that I needed to do. He brought in a big ass couch that took up most of my working area. Um, but when I got back, when I was up there in Montana, I got a car from a woman named Fred Jepson, Cammy Fred Amon Jepson. It was a Chevy Corsica. And when I was up there getting my teeth yanked, there was a guy up there who did tile work and he needed help with the tile. So he told me before he hired me, he said he's not going to hire me unless I can get a vehicle. I told him I had a vehicle in Boulder. I just needed the money to go get it. So I worked for him long enough to be able to go get my vehicle. And I went and got it. And when I got back to Montana, like I had been in contact with him every single day. But the day that I got up to Montana, he had changed his mind and he was already in another place. And he's like, oh, well, this is going to be a 6-week job and you have to pass a background check and so on and so forth. And it's in Yellowstone, so I really can't use you for at least 6 weeks. And then the next job is going to be you got to jump through a bunch of hoops too. And I was staying up there in a parking lot. Something Apple is the name of the grocery stores up there. And I went, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going back to Boulder. So on the way back to Boulder, my car broke down on the Little Bighorn River. The thermostat went out and it overheated. And a man gave me a ride back to a town called Hardin, which is on it's just north of the Little Bighorn River. And so this guy wanted me to perform sexual acts for him in order to get that ride, and I refused. So he dropped me off, pissed off that I wouldn't masturbate for him. But I was able to walk to a parts store, and I spent the last of my money to get a thermostat and some tools. And a couple of Native Americans up there gave me a ride, a man and his son. They bought me a ratchet set, and they took me to my Corsica, which I was able to change the thermostat, but um, the there's a cover on the flywheel on the engine, and there was a rock that was stuck in between. There's a little piston that comes out to engage the flywheel, and there was a rock stuck in it, and it prevented it from disengaging. And I made it about 50 to 100 feet before the flywheel tore my starter off of my engine, and it's of course attached to the block, so it literally tore the side of the block out, and it was oil all over the road. And I was stuck out there for about 9 hours, and it was very hot. And finally, I was able to get a guy to come give me a ride, and he picked up. He gave me a ride to his place in a town called Buffalo, and picked up a flatbed, and we went back out and got the Corsica, and we drove the Corsica when we got out to the Corsica, there was a cop there. Like, I'd been out there for 9 hours, no cop ever showed up. Nobody bothered to stop until that dude stopped. And then when I get back to my vehicle, this officer was trying to ticket my vehicle for being out there. But I was able to sell that vehicle to that dude from Buffalo for scrap money. He gave me $140 for it, and there was probably about $2,000 worth of tools in it, and I couldn't take them all. But Brandon and Veronica, they came and picked me up, and I gave them all the money that I had. It was like 14 hours round trip drive for them, so I was extremely grateful. And of course, it cost them every bit of that money for gas, so I gave it all to them, and we finally got back to my shop. And Josh was staying out there at the shop, and he was playing video games until like 4 o'clock in the morning. He wasn't going to work like he was supposed to be because he was too busy playing video games. And he got us kicked out on my birthday in 2015. Well, the day before my birthday in 2015, and my back was already pretty screwed up, and I was not happy with Josh. I was going to buy myself a little Chevy S10 from Brandon Ratner, and he wanted $900 for it, and I was only $100 short of getting it. And when we got kicked out, literally all of that money went to moving my stuff and Josh's stuff into a storage facility in Boulder. And Josh wasn't really paying his share. There was a guy named Russell Huggins, and I was about a month and a half behind on paying the rent there. And I had screwed up my back moving out of my shop, moving a gun lathe that I was trying to convert to make World War One airplane engines in miniature. And that's how I screwed up my back. Um, so I couldn't take care of myself. I was homeless. I had most of my stuff in a backpack, all the stuff that you need to survive. You have to keep in your backpack. You can't just go hide it somewhere. And I didn't have an income at that point, and uh, I was having a friggin' nervous breakdown. And the the people at the Starbucks, I'd always taken care of them, been walking them out to the trash can since they had an issue a few years earlier with some homeless people that got kicked out of Starbucks, cornering one of the Starbucks folks and threatening to stab him with a knife. So I'd spent a few years walking them out. And there was a woman there named Devin Cockerill, and she got the wrong idea. There was after I had hurt my back, she saw me crying, and she wanted to go have a beer with me after work. Well, after work, she walked right past me like she didn't even see me, and I didn't understand what I had done wrong. And so I asked her the next day, and of course, she invited me to her house, which has always been against my rules. And I went to her house, and I tried to explain what was going on as best I could, and that I was moving over a. It was a pretty fucked up situation with Josh, and he had a big crush on Devin, so he kept on harassing me about her, and I just really at that point wanted him to leave me alone. And so the situation there ended up pretty screwed up, and everybody at Starbucks was treating me different, and I'm like, this is fucked up. I didn't do anything wrong to any of these people. I was averaging an hour of sleep a night or less because the police just wouldn't leave me alone. Because I had a backpack, I couldn't walk further than a block. And one morning, one of Eric's friends who knew that I used the recycling bin behind the pedestrian shop, he got into there and he stole all of my stuff, including my computer and all of that stuff. And I'm autistic, so I use that technology stuff to basically take my mind off the fact that life sucks. It helps me to calm down and relax and basically it's my release from all the bullshit. So one of the ladies there, her name was Nicole Van Duzer. She gave me her old computer, and although it couldn't play video games, it was able to play YouTube videos. And it got to the point with Devin and with everybody else there treating me differently that I just no longer felt comfortable at the Starbucks, and I needed to leave, so I did. But there was a guy named Russell Huggins, and he gave me the money to make sure that the shop or the storage rent was paid because Josh wasn't paying his share. And Russell has helped me a lot out since then monetarily too, but we'll get to that later. Um, there was a young woman. There was actually a set of twins, and before I hurt my back, I had been having problems with the folks at the Starbucks, and I was trying to be patient and hoping everything would work itself out. And it was the girl that died. Her name is Natalie Bollinger, and her twin sister Alicia Bollinger. They were walking down the street with a couple of older gentlemen, and I hadn't seen them in years. The last time I saw them, they were with a guy named Arturo and a guy named Emery, and one of those twins was in a sleeping bag with Emery, and the other was in a sleeping bag with Arturo. I always made my rounds in the morning so that I could let people that had blankets know that it's time to wake up before the cops get there. And uh, Natalie and Alicia were only 13 or 14 at the time. I didn't actually know their names. So when I saw him after I uh, had lost my shop, um, or when I saw him that night just before I lost my shop, because I wasn't staying at the shop, I was still homeless. I just had my stuff out at the shop for working. And they walked by with those two older gentlemen. I figured it'd been a few years. They were probably old enough to talk to, especially since the guys they were with were definitely at least 18 years of age. Well, she wasn't quite 18 yet, but they saw me and they ran over and gave me a hug and told me to hit them up on Facebook and wrote down their information. And I sent them each a message and basically forgot about them. I mean, at that point, I didn't even remember their names. But after about 6 months after I had hurt my back, um, Natalie showed up, and uh, there was a mutual friend of ours named Maddie Boa. She's a lesbian, and she had gotten beaten up because her dad found out she was a lesbian. And there was an officer named Abel Ramos and one named Jenny Paddock who had told me, because I don't like seeing the little kids down there with all them. Basically, the library crowd is the druggies. They're the ones that are severe alcoholics or the ones that are on meth or heroin and things like that. And I didn't know at the time that Natalie had actually been selling drugs for her dad down there since she was 13. He was also molesting her, and he was a very violent man. Um, his name is Ted Bollinger. So I was suicidal. I didn't have a place to go. After I hurt my back, all of my friends had abandoned me. Um, Brandon Ratner was still dating Veronica Randall at the time, but Veronica was just being extremely mean. And I couldn't explain everything on my flip phone because you only get a certain amount of characters per text, and it takes 50 cents per text. And she would just text me, and I was so frustrated because, like, I could have explained so much more if she'd have just called and listened, but she just never did. And by the way, texting makes me want to blow my head off. So it's because people take it wrong. And nearly everybody that I've been texting with is some of them took it wrong just because of bad typing, but most of them intentionally took it wrong because they're assholes. Bless you.
You're okay. Keep going.
So I still couldn't walk a block, I needed to lighten up my backpack so that I could actually go places. Josh Hughes was supposed to be paying me some money, and he wasn't. He was too busy chasing tail and buying drugs and alcohol and things like that, and telling me he doesn't have any money. And I'm like, dude, you're spending all your money on alcohol. You're spending all your money on drugs. You're spending all your money to try to get women to come over and have sex with you. I mean, as soon as we got kicked out of the shop, his parents immediately rented him a place in Boulder, and that's not cheap. So he was better off than he let me on to believe. And so I got some Vicodin from a lady named DJ Wow. This is one of the cross dressers there in Boulder. And DJ Wow gave me 37 Vicodin, and I was going into the Starbucks bathroom to eat all those Vicodin. And that's when Natalie came back into my life. She was 18 at that point. And she sat down with me and had a conversation and explained to me that she remembered me from when she was younger and that she had wanted to kill herself 100 times and that thinking of me was the reason that she didn't. She explained to me what a bunch of pieces of shit her family are, her dad especially. And she spent about 2 hours with me. And she was supposed to be meeting with Maddie Boa. So Maddie, after waiting for 2 hours, saw us through the window at Starbucks and came over and talked with us. And that was around the time that probably within a couple of weeks of when I just got tired of being at the Starbucks and people treating me weird. I was like, this is not a comfortable place for me to be. So I decided I was going to move. And I was living under the Pigeon Ship Bridge over by the library. And Eric was all fucked up on meth all the damn time. And it was impossible to have a conversation with him. And I just hurt a lot physically and emotionally. And Natalie literally rescued me from all that because of her talking to me. It occurred to me that if I killed myself, that she might kill herself, and I didn't want that. So I flushed those Vicodin down the toilet. And Candace Dale, that's what I knew her as. It's Candace Bondurant now, I guess. Called me up and told me I couldn't sleep in pigeon shit and that she was going to come down and pick me up. Now, by this point, Natalie was having problems with her boyfriend. He had held her down and was screaming in her face, and she had gone back to get her dog. She had tried to help me to get a job working for the Save the Bees people down in Denver, but I couldn't make it to Denver. I didn't have any money. And she had helped me to lighten up my load and all of that kind of stuff. And she was my hero. Her and Maddie Boa both. Maddie Boa came down to talk to me every single day. And so it got to the point where I couldn't afford the storage anymore. And it was just, I didn't have an income. There's no way I could pay for storage anymore. And I had to move out. And moving my stuff out of storage, I was taking it up here to Nebraska. I had a vehicle that I had bought. Um, and it broke down on the side of the road. So all of my stuff that was at storage was just left out there. I couldn't get back there for weeks. But Candace, when I went to her house, Natalie said I was really the only reason that she was staying in Colorado, and she wasn't sure if she could handle it without me. And her boyfriend was being abusive, and her dad couldn't stay off the drugs, and her uncle was not staying off the drugs, and they were telling her that people are out to kill them and all sorts of crazy shit because they couldn't stay off the meth. And so Natalie's sister was gonna drive them both to Virginia, and Natalie, at first, they were going to come and see me in Julesburg or Chapel because it's on the route to Virginia. But then they let me know that she couldn't keep her vehicle because she couldn't afford it because she had a Land Rover. And so they were going to get on an airplane and they really wanted to see me before they left. So Aunt B, that's Brenda Dickinson here, her niece gave me a ride, and it was I spent the money on gas and paid for food so that we could go. And I was working for Brenda at the time, helping to clean her house because she's a dust fanatic. She's severely paranoid of dust. Um, so I spent some time working on her house the best I could with a screwed up back, and I made that money. And or not Lana, Natalie and Alicia and Maddie Boa, they were all expecting me. But then when I was on the way there, none of them answered their phone. They didn't answer it until I was on the way back. Now, in the meantime, I had lost my job um, that I had paid for that car for. I got the car from um, Laura Nelson and her husband David Nelson, and it had steering column problems. The steering column came loose, and you had to get underneath and tighten it up. Well, I didn't know that at the time, and so it was real difficult for me. Um, we're gonna have to pause for a second. I was using some needle nose pliers and pulling some stuff out of the carpet with it while I talked, so I lost track of where I was at. So I had a heart issue and on my way to work one day, and because of that heart issue I had it scheduled for when I was supposed to go see them. I couldn't stay down there because I needed to be back at Julesburg Hospital on Monday to do a stress test for my heart. And in the meantime, I had lost my job, and Candace, she had kicked me out saying that her baby's daddy was paranoid of having another man in the house, and so she had to let me go. So I was staying at Dennis and Brenda Dickinson's at that point. And when I got back from the trip to go see Natalie and Alicia and Maddie, and they hadn't answered their phones, um, I was pretty sad that I didn't get to see them. And so Natalie called me and she told me she really, really wanted to see me and that she wasn't getting on the airplane unless I promised to go see her in Virginia. So I did. And I started trying to set up the trip with Maddie Boa. And Maddie wasn't able to go because she got busted selling methamphetamines. And I was a few months late. All of my money was going to food and things. All the money that I was earning from Brenda, a lot of it, Dennis would come home. Brenda wanted me to promise not to tell Uncle D that I was working on the house because she didn't want to hear the whole raft of shit she'd get from him. So he'd come home every day and give me a whole raft of shit about how lazy I am, about how I'm eating all of his food and drinking all of his coffee and smoking all of his wife's weed. And I'm like, dude. And of course, I can't say anything because I promised Brenda I wouldn't. So I ended up giving him most of the money that I earned for to pay for food and to pay for coffee. And of course, Brenda still didn't speak up. She was fine with me taking it. And Rory Jepson, he helped me to change the brakes on my vehicle. I was finally able to get on the road to go to Virginia, and I had enough money saved up where I would have had about $300 to work with when I got to Virginia. And I really didn't want to drive all that way, but Natalie had called me one night. She told me that she was suicidal, and if I wasn't already on the road, that she was going to kill herself. So a few hours later, she ran her Saturn into a telephone pole. and she'd already had issues with it because her tires had popped and a bunch of other stuff, and she was already in Virginia, and she broke her leg on that in that accident, and it just really fucked her life up. And she was trying to stay off the heroin, but since she fucked up her leg, they gave her prescription opiates. And it was around this time that Natalie sent me an email about her dad and what a piece of shit he was, about how he'd tried to beat her stepmother to death, and about her mother being neglectful and choosing abusive men over her kids, and basically the same thing I had to deal with mom and dad. And although dad never tried to beat his wives to death, which is good. I mean, I got to admit, my dad is 100 times better than Ted Bollinger will ever be. But like for me, growing up with being in the system because dad couldn't stay off the cocaine, I mean, that's not my fault, you know. And you were around for that. I mean, he's your brother. You know what happened with that, you know. And dad wants to play it off, but I mean, you've told me what happened, and Uncle Scott's told me what happened, and Mom's told me what happened. I mean, he wants to play it off, but I mean, he his kids grew up in the system because he couldn't stay off the cocaine, and that's what it all comes down to. Like me and Eric weren't locked up in the places that we were because we were bad kids. We were locked up because our parents. I mean, it's not like dad could have me in prison, and it's not like mom could have me in rehab.
Yeah.
But where was I at? Oh yeah, getting ready to go to Virginia. There was a woman named Mahalia Jean Pierre, and she was in Virginia, and she was going to try to help me uh, with the art scene there in Richmond, Virginia, because I'm a hell of an artist. And she had a kid, and she was needing a ride to Boulder, and I was going to give it to her. I planned on going to visit Natalie and Alicia for about 2 weeks and picking up Mahalia for the ride back. Sorry, there's a train going by. They usually honk that thing twice. All right, there's the second one. Anyway, there was another girl named, I don't remember if it was Rachel or Rebecca, but she needed a rescue, and she had a mutual friend in common with me. I didn't really know who she was, but when I got to Virginia, I realized who she was. But we'll get to that in a little bit. I got about halfway to Virginia, and my car broke down outside of a rest stop there, and I got lucky. A guy with a flatbed trailer came and got me. He was just happened to be going the other way, and he had to make a turnaround there. And so he gave me a ride almost back to Chapel, Nebraska. But what had happened there is Jamie Curtis, she had called me and said that she needed a hero. And I got a hold of Natalie to let her know that I had to turn around. And I actually asked Natalie's permission because I didn't want to abandon Natalie. And she said it was all right. And so I turned back around, and I headed back to Nebraska. On that guy gave me a ride on his flatbed, and once I was in Nebraska, he dropped it off, and I was able to get my vehicle fixed, and I was able to get up there to South Dakota to rescue Jamie and her son. There was a guy named Todd Rust. He and his family also helped, and she was her boyfriend at the time was a guy named James Payton, and it was me and James Payton and two of her coworkers and Todd Rust and his family that were helping Jamie move out of the place. And she got a few people to help her come up with the money and be co-signers so she could get an apartment up there. And the first night at her apartment, I stayed at her apartment and I rescued an owl with a guy, a police officer from Boston with red hair who lived in South Dakota. I had flagged him over because the owl hit the telephone pole right there. And Jamie came back all bruised to shit. And told me about what happened there with their domestic violence thing, which I later found out from the guy that bruised her up like that. He had a different story to tell, and from the story that he told, it's really believable that it happened the way that he said. It's a lot more believable the way that he said it than it is the way that she played it off. But um, we got her out of there, and I started back on the road to go see Natalie. And she thought Jamie's son was my son. I was like, no, no, he's not. I wish, but he's not. And I got back to Chapel. I needed a little bit more money for gas to get to Virginia, and then I started on the road. It took about 5 hours or 5 days to get there, and by the time I got there, I was pretty well dirt broke. Um, Natalie was excited to have me there. My first day there, I let him know I was coming over to see him, and she let me know that I couldn't come over to her house because her mom would not understand. Um, Natalie and I love differently. It wasn't a boyfriend girlfriend thing. It was we both grew up in hell. Both grew up with shitty parents that couldn't stay off the drugs. We both grew up with mothers who chose abuse of men over their own children. I mean, it was just we had a lot in common, and she had saved my life. And so when I finally got there, I picked a Starbucks off of Military Highway, and this is in Chesapeake. And it turned out that I had gone to the wrong Starbucks. Her and her sister invited me to Virginia Beach, and they showed up with a couple of drunk guys that were assholes. And they kept apologizing because those two drunk assholes were there. And of course, Natalie's got her leg in that cast. By that time, Mahalia had gotten an airplane ticket from her dad to go to Boulder, so I didn't need to rescue her. And that lady, Rachel or Rebecca, whatever her name was, I was able to get her to her parents' house. They'd thrown her away when she was a teenager because they're super ultra Christian and she's or conservative Christian and she's a lesbian, but she had a kid by that point and she was staying with a guy who demanded sexual favors even though she'd paid him rent. This guy was demanding that he get sexual favors from her in order to stay there. So her and her son, they moved out of there and I was able to get her parents' address from her. And I went to her parents' house and I explained that she's not a lesbian anymore. She's got a son. And obviously, if she's got a son, she's not a lesbian. And they told me they'd take her back as long as I never talked to them again because I used a lot of curse words. Um, so they're not going to want to talk to me again. But at least we got her safe, and Mahalia's dad helped to get her safe. So the only friends I had left there were Natalie and Alicia Bollinger. Meanwhile, Amy and Andrew Witcher, Andrew's mother was from the area, and they were supposed to be able to help me to get a job painting houses there. Well, Andrew's mother never got back in contact with me, and I stayed in contact with Amy the whole time I was up there in Virginia trying to get that done. The guy that um, gave me the phone to go rescue Rachel with, he hooked me up with a guy there that was supposed to be cleaning up hurricane damage, flood damage, stuff like that. And I was going to do that while I was in Virginia. And that didn't end up happening because he got in trouble for beating on his wife. So I didn't have a job while I was up there. I was dirt broke. I had a fucked up back. And the only two people that I had to, as a safety support network was Natalie and Alicia. And that first night on Virginia Beach, Alicia had told me that her boyfriend works at a Starbucks over by the Cricket store where she works, and that I should just go stay behind there because that way they could visit me more often. and they made the trip a lot of fun. I mean, it was definitely worthwhile. It was great. And then they invited me to the pagoda, and it was around this time that me and Dad got into an argument because Eric needed help because he was out on meth, and Dad was just an asshole about it. And you know how he gets, just fucking screaming and shit like that. And I just had enough of it. And he blocked me for telling me he was a fucking filthy goddamn cunt rag. I think those were my exact words. And then Candace, the lady that told me that her baby's daddy didn't want me there, she changed her story and she told me, well, it was because you quit your job. And I'm like, I didn't quit my job. I got fired because I had those heart issues, and you should have, been honest with me about it. And then Miss Jerry and all of them, they had made a post that I didn't particularly care for. And instead of letting it go, like when I typed on it that because they thought that Colin Kaepernick should be punched in the throat for not standing for the national anthem. I said, well, hey, they said a soldier should. I said, well, hey, then somebody should punch a soldier in the throat. I mean, if you're willing to hurt American citizens like that, that's not fair. I believe in fair and equal treatment. And instead of trying to understand, they all ganged up on me, and I decided that I was just gonna leave it alone. And I defended them when one of my other friends was on the post calling them fascists and stuff like that. And her name is Amy Valkyrie, and she was very respectful about it, unlike them. But Amy knows homelessness, and Lana and Amanda and all of them, the closest they've ever been is living in a camper trailer. So, I mean, they really don't know what it's like. They don't know the hell that we go through. So, Miss Jerry blocked me. And since she's the only one out of all of them that I actually trusted, I just blocked all of them. I blocked them. I blocked Mike Vernon. I blocked her niece, Kendall. I didn't want to deal with being ganged up like that. And I got rid of all of them. And so, when we went to the pagoda, I got to hear about Shelly Campbell. That's Natalie and Alicia's ex stepmother. And at the time, Natalie and Alicia wanted me to move there to Virginia. They'd been trying to help me get a job at Labor Ready, and they, without my permission, had been looking at apartments up there for me to move into. And I didn't want to stay up there. I wanted to go back to Boulder and see my loved ones. And now that I had a vehicle, I didn't have to carry my backpack everywhere, so I could go see people. And I was having a severe panic attack most of the time I was there. I was still suicidal. I still was having a rough time. I didn't know how I was going to make ends meet up there. And I finally got to work at a Labor Ready. We cleaned up some flood damage in North Carolina. And Alicia is actually the one that got me that job. And Natalie was trying to get me a job at Vico Construction with her mom. And she had also helped me to try to get a job through Craigslist, which I don't know shit about. Anything with the internet, you gotta teach me, or I'm gonna fuck it up. And when we went to Pagoda, we talked about getting Natalie's stepmother Shelly safe, get her away from Ted Bollinger because he's an abusive asshole who'd already tried to beat her to death once, at least. And of course, she's got kids, and they wanted their siblings safe too. So that was what all that was about. And then we were supposed to go out on my birthday and have a picnic in her driveway, Natalie and Alicia's mother's driveway. And so I'd screwed up my back even worse working at a Labor Ready, and I didn't have any money. Most of it had been spent on gas because you have to pay the person who drives you, and the person who drove us all the way from uh, Chesapeake, Virginia, down to North Carolina where the flood damage was, and it was expensive. and I had bought gas for my vehicle, and I my clothes reeked, so I bought some socks and I cleaned out my car, and basically I was down to my last $20, and Natalie insisted on seeing me for my birthday. And so on my birthday, I drove down to the McDonald's over by their house, and I stayed there for the night because it was closer. I didn't want to have to deal with traffic, and I really didn't know how to use the MapQuest or whatever that well, and the roads there fucking suck. So um, I ended up getting severely dehydrated. They'd just redone the blacktop in the McDonald's parking lot there on South Military Highway. And I got severely dehydrated on my birthday. And Natalie was always the subservient one. So she always did what Alicia wanted. So instead of me and Alicia, or me and Natalie having a one on one conversation, we went to a place called Elliot's Coffee Grounds. And we were a few hours late leaving, like 6 or 7 hours late. And I had sweated out about 10 pounds worth of fluids. And I really wasn't doing well mentally, and I wasn't doing well physically. And so we went to Elliot's Coffee Grounds. And while we were there, Natalie's mom found her heroin. And I really had hoped that she was done with it by then. And it was just a really messed up scenario. Well, then I had been given a phone that used to be Natalie's old phone. Her sister Alicia gave it to me. And that telephone had a cracked screen, and it basically did whatever it wanted. Well, Alicia wanted to give me that for my birthday. So the flip phone that I brought with me, Alicia worked at Cricket, and she had that number switched over onto the phone that her sister used to have. And so my Cricket phone didn't work anymore, or my flip phone didn't work anymore, but the Cricket phone did, and it didn't work worth a shit. And when I was typing with people, it was memorizing what it is that I was typing, and then it was doing the autofill crap. And one of the people from that racist post from Tyler Frericks, um, I want to say his name is something Wolf. Uh, what was his name? Well, anyway, he was being a racist asshole, and I was arguing with him on that phone. And for the first couple of days that I had that phone, everything wasn't all trained into it like that, but I didn't know how the thing worked. And after a couple of days of arguing with that asshat, it just ended up to where everybody that I was typing on that thing, it was typing all that fucked up shit, like fuck you and kiss my ass and you're a monster and stuff like that. I really don't fucking like racists. Not that you already knew that, but so it ended up that when I was typing to Natalie and Alicia, that it was doing that to them. It was autofilling, and the longer I typed, the more likely it is to do that. And the one of the cracks was over the part that says send. So the longer I type, the more likely it is to have a glitch and send it to them unedited. And I was having a severe panic attack, so I am very heavy-handed with my typing, and it just I felt bad because none of the stuff that they were getting sent was meant for them. It was meant for Tyler's friend, Wes King. That's his name, Wes King. He didn't even know how to spell the N word right. Shows you what a racist moron he is. Not even decent at fucking. Anyway, that's not the important part. The important part is that phone. It If I didn't turn it off, then it repeatedly called whoever I called last. It had done that with Candace, even though I was done talking to her. I did try to call her while I was up there and patch things up and explain to her, hey, I'm really having a hard time, and I needed you to not treat me like shit. I'm having a panic attack. We don't have spoiled lives like you do. Not everybody has a mother like yours, Candace, you know? But so it had called Candace probably about 10 or 15 times. And then the next person that I called after Candace was a guy named Neil DiMuccio. And it ended up calling him about 15 or 20 times. And then I called Natalie, and that didn't go over too well because her voicemail was full and she didn't answer. And so it basically called her a whole shit ton of times in one night while I was sleeping. And so my birthday on the 18th, of course, it was the last time that I saw her. And by the time the 21st rolled around, her sister was sending some pretty fucked up text messages, being accusational and an asshole. And I was like, I don't need this. You know what I'm saying? Um, Everything after that gets 100 times more complicated. Um, so I was going to go see Natalie. She was going to see me on the following Monday. And I didn't make it till Monday. I wasn't sleeping. I was having a severe panic attack. Her sister was being mean. The phone was fucked up, so it wasn't even my choice. And I needed her to understand that. Her sister's boyfriend and one of his coworkers there at the Starbucks had taught me how to use the MapQuest by that point. And Natalie or Alicia had quit her job at Cricket literally within 10 minutes. Train. So Alicia had quit her job literally within 10 minutes of changing my phone over. So I really hadn't seen her at work. You know, I was just basically living behind where she used to work and trying to figure out how I was going to get back to chapel because I didn't have any money. I spent the last of the money that I had to go see Natalie for her birthday or for my birthday. I want you to know Natalie was super sweet. She was wonderful. But her family are a bunch of pieces of shit. It's like mom's side of the family with mine. And so I got my car stuck outside of her house while I was going there to explain to her what was going on with the phone and with being dehydrated and all of that. And I got stuck out in the middle of the road. And that problem that David and Laura Nelson can verify that that whole steering column issue with that vehicle was pre-existing before then. And Ken and Leah Wilson can verify that it was a problem that existed after then as well. But I got my car stuck in the road, and I had a vehicle narrowly miss me, and they honked their horn as they went by, and it scared the hell out of me. And when the MapQuest had said the way I got stuck there is MapQuest told me to make a U-turn, and I hadn't slept in a few days, and obviously your brain doesn't work right after that. And when it said to make a U-turn, I immediately tried to make a U-turn, and I was pointed right at their house, and it scared the hell out of me. And when that car went by, I froze. I couldn't look to that side of the road because I didn't want to see it coming if a family of six came by and craned into me with a minivan. So I laid on my horn so that people would hear me, you know, before they came around the corner. And Natalie's mom came out, um, and she mouthed the words, "I'm calling the cops," and I mouthed the words, "Thank you." I was pretty fucking glad about that. I mean, I was stuck in the road. There wasn't a damn thing I could do about it, and I was in a pretty bad way. Well, the cops showed up and they put me in the back of their vehicle, but they didn't arrest me and they didn't take a police report. And while I was in the back seat of the vehicle, I read that I was stalking a male resident of that household. I'm like, I'm not fucking stalking anybody. My car is stuck in the hospital. I was stuck there for a few days. I got a hold of Brenda Dickinson. The cops had promised me they weren't going to tow my vehicle. They did tow my vehicle. And the hospital, they told me I have diabetes and um, They put 2 bags of saline water into me because I was severely dehydrated and diagnosed me with panic disorder, and then released me with a piece of paper that said that the closest place that I could go for help was like 8 miles away, and it's nighttime. So I went over to a Food Lion over by the hospital, and one of the employees there, he bought me a phone charger so that I could charge my phone. And even though you're not allowed to charge your phones in their building, he told me where I could charge it and not get in trouble for it. He told me that if the manager talks to him, just tell him that he gave me permission. And that guy bought me some food too. And so I was able to get a hold of Brandon Ratner and Aunt B and all them, and I was able to get my vehicle out of the impound. And I was trying to make a police report about the police breaking my vehicle, but the people on the other end, the 911 dispatch and all them, were playing fucking retarded. They were playing stupid, like, "Oh, you somebody broke into your vehicle and broke it." I'm like, "No, the police broke my vehicle." And she's like, "Oh, well, you're telling me that you need a police officer there because somebody broke your vehicle." I said, "No, I'm telling you that the police broke my vehicle. I need to make a report because the police broke my vehicle." Well, I had sent Natalie and Alicia both text messages. I understood being stuck in the road, honking my horn, how it could be taken. And I let them know if them or their family were afraid of me, just to let me know and that I would leave and that I would never talk to them again. So Natalie called me on Alicia's phone and told me that her family was that told me that she loved me first, but that her family was afraid of me and not to talk to her again. So I decided, well, fuck it. I'm not going to stay in this state, and the police really aren't worth it. I'd rather let Natalie and her family have this whole fucking state. I'm going back to Boulder. And on the way back to Boulder, I called Maddie Boa, who is the drug dealer who is supposed to be going with me to Virginia, the one who got busted selling meth, and she didn't let me say shit. She started off with "you're creepy," this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth, and told me not to talk to her again and hung up on me. So that was that. Well, by the time I got back to Boulder, I had people. At first, the rumors that they started was that I had stalked Natalie and Alicia. Well, Natalie and Alicia started that rumor. I got proof that I didn't stalk either one of them. But then the rumors that Maddie had been telling is that I threatened Alicia and her family. That's according to Alicia, apparently. And I hadn't threatened Alicia, Natalie, or their family. And Maddie had no business spreading those rumors to all of her little meth customers. So when I went to go see Eric or any of my other friends, I had to deal with people threatening me. My first day there, I was so excited to be back in Boulder, and within just a couple of hours, I had a dude pushing me and telling me I needed to leave, and so on and so forth. And it didn't take long before people were twisted that rumor even worse, calling me a child molester and a rapist, saying that they heard that I molested some girl in Virginia and I raped some girl in Virginia. And I'm like, first of all, like, that isn't even fucking close to what happened. And so I tried to get a hold of Maddie to get her to put a stop to those rumors. I tried to get a hold of Alicia and Natalie. I unblocked them on Facebook and tried to get them to put a stop to the rumors, and they just treated me completely like shit. They wouldn't talk to me, they'd just text, and they were texting mean shit. And I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, literally, listen to what's going on. I am being abused for things that I never did to you. Put a stop to it, please, so I can see my loved ones. But they're fucking junkies. I mean, what can you do? And so I came back to Chapel to stay away from all that and avoid it. And the fucking harassment was on the internet too. I'm like, fuck, people leave me alone. And Natalie's ex-boyfriend, the one that had stolen her dog and was fucking held her down and was screaming in her face when she told him that she was leaving, like he was getting a hold of me and threatening me. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is a dude who actually did fucked up shit to her, and he's fucking calling me to harass me. This is fucked up. I just want to be left the fuck alone. Anyway, I've been I've been talking for about an hour. I'll try to remember where I was at, and I'll call you in a bit. Okay.
Okay, I'll talk to you in an hour, but I'm gonna plug my phone in and charge it. So,
All right.
okay,
Be safe, Aunt Mary.
all right, bye.
Bye.